There are countless boss fights in Geometry Dash, and today I'll be ranking the most popular ones in the form of a tier list, because, let's be real, that just gets more views. Watch until the end, because trust me, the bosses only get crazier the further we go. And hey, if you disagree with my ranking, just know that I don't care. Also, less than 0.5% of people watching my videos are actually subscribed. I'm not the kind of guy to beg or threaten people for subs, but if you do not subscribe, then Didi might just come and knock at your door at 3 AM. Me personally, I would not risk it. Starting off with a level many of you might already be familiar with, because it's actually an official level from the 2.2 update. Cursed Thorn appears at the very end of the last level in the tower, featuring, unsurprisingly, a Thorn boss fight in platformer mode. Now, the boss itself is pretty simple, and none of its attacks are too complex, but that's to be expected since it was made by RobTop himself. Honestly, I do like the fact that instead of just dodging attacks like most boss fights, here you actually have to attack and time your shots to defeat it. Of course, this level got its fair share of hate, and yeah, I kind of get it. There's not a lot going on, and it can be pretty frustrating having to redo the entire level just because you died to what's ultimately a pretty underwhelming fight. That's why I'm putting it in D tier. Not because it's bad, but simply because there are way better boss fights coming up next. Next up, we've got a mega collab featuring some of the biggest names in the community, and that's none other than Boomslayer. This level really stuck with me when I first played it, especially the boss fight made by H-Hyper. And let me tell you, the boss animations are insanely clean. The way the boss moves back and forth, shifting perspectives throughout the fight makes it feel so much more alive. And the attacks, every single one is unique, no lazy repeats. You've got cannon hands, the boss's head literally detaching from its body, spinning in a full 360 while firing lasers everywhere. The boss art and backgrounds by Scorch VX are insanely polished, and the whole fight syncs perfectly with the music. Speaking of which, the soundtrack was custom made for this level by BoomKitty. This was made in 2.1, before custom sound effects were even a thing. But since they had BoomKitty on board, they could bypass this limitation easily and include their own sound effects, which only makes this fight even more legendary. The only real downside? The length. It's not too short and it works well in the level, but compared to other boss fights coming up next, it does fall slightly behind. A tier. Alright, next up is Crazy 3, the sequel to Crazy 1 and Crazy 2 by DavJT, both of which were undeniably top tier levels back in the day. The level itself is amazing, with a ton of attention to detail. Now, the boss fight here is a lot simpler, but that was clearly intentional. Even so, it matches the chaotic music perfectly, and I think that plays a huge role in why this fight still ranks pretty high, despite its simplicity. The attacks are all cool and creative. I especially love that boom-style cartoon cloud effect when the boss destroys some of the structures. Not much else to say for this one, I'm placing it in high C tier. And before you pause the video to rage in the comments, just watch until the end. The remaining bosses are even crazier. See what I did there? Crazier? Crazy? Now, this is where we step into the dark side of Geometry Dash. The Lobotomy, and more specifically, the level is called Logodomy. This level blew up with the release of the 2.2 update, and honestly, it's just pure brain rot. But hey, I'm not gonna go on a full rant about this whole meme, because in the end it actually had a positive impact on the game. It helped expand the player base by reaching TikTok's audience, mostly consisting of 9-year-old toddlers with the attention span of a goldfish. This boss fight is a little different from the others, since, like Cursed Thorn, it actually lets the player fight back, except this time it's way better. The inspiration is clearly from Terraria's Empress of Light boss fight. The fight itself is absolute chaos. It took me quite a few attempts just to figure out what was even happening on my screen. Lasers flying everywhere, stupid little difficulty faces from the Lobotomy meme popping up, tons of projectiles and attacks, and surprisingly, you actually get a health bar here. This makes the fight more forgiving, giving you some room for mistakes, which I think is a really cool addition. Is it a meme level? Yes. Is it unique? Absolutely. But let's be real, you cannot see a single thing happening on the screen. B tier. iSpyWithMyLittleEye. This one, being more of an effect style level, is easily the craziest one on the list. The music sync here is absolutely unmatched. The boss fight is pure chaos, and yet somehow it's executed perfectly so that the player can still see what's happening and react to the attacks in time. The boss itself might look simple, but with all the insane effects surrounding it, the fight feels incredibly satisfying to watch and play. And we can't forget about the transitions in this level. These are, hands down, some of the cleanest and most creative transitions I've ever seen in a GD level before. The only real downside is that it's a 2D fight, and the boss itself isn't the most visually complex if we compare it to Boomslayer or, spoiler alert, some of the ones that we will be looking at shortly. This one easily lands in upper B tier. Next up is Against the God. It features two boss fights, one against a floating holy orb with an eye, which to me resembles a light elemental. Its movements are fluid, nothing overly flashy, but still impressive nonetheless. Then, near the end of the level, the player faces the actual boss, a massive golden dragon. What really sets this level apart is the atmosphere it creates. Unlike most other boss fights on the list, it doesn't rely on flashy effects or erratic boss movements. Instead, it flows smoothly, which isn't easy to execute well. The music syncs perfectly with the level's overall feel, and the screen shakes are on point. And when you consider that this level is pretty darn old and was built on mobile, it's clear that it deserves a high spot on the list. A tier. Next one is Gear 3. This is one of the oldest levels on the list, and honestly, I'm including it because, well, it's my video and I can. But let's take a moment to appreciate just how nonchalant this boss is. It's literally just standing there, aura farming. Sure, it's an angry gear with tentacles, but for some reason it gives off this chill vibe, barely moving, except when it attacks with its claws or fires the occasional laser. The soundtrack is an absolute banger, adding that missing sense of chaos. And while this level is definitely outdated, I still have to give it some credit. That being said, I won't be placing it dead last on the list. Yep. Next level, we got Ultra Violence by Zendergame. This level features two bosses. The first one is a spider-like insect that mainly attacks by trying to stab you with its claws and launching electric balls straight at your face. A unique twist here is the switch right before the fight. When activated, it spawns a well-animated soul-like fairy creature that helps guide you through the battle, and honestly, that's a lifesaver, because those portals are kinda confusing at first. Then, after a short intermission, you meet the big boy, who wastes zero time introducing himself with a massive laser beam. The words "don't blink" flash on the screen, and suddenly, this massive robot starts launching surprise attacks from all directions before straight up consuming you. The way the final screen fades in with the dramatic finish of the music, wow, easily goes into S tier. B by Motley and Scorch. If the name isn't self-explanatory, the boss is literally a bee, more specifically a queen bee, trying to fight you for invading its honeycomb or something, I don't know. This level is insanely popular with well over 10 million downloads, and it even ranks 4th on the online level list when filtered by difficulty. If you've played it, you probably understand why. The modern yet cartoonish design of the bees and environment looks really nice, and the music has this catchy upbeat feel that fits perfectly with the rest of the level. But what really scratches my brain have to be the swarms of little bees jittering up and down in the background. It's oddly satisfying to watch. The boss itself is just a bigger bee with the same bored expression on its face, which is honestly kinda cute. It mainly attacks with its stinger, but in phase 2 it suddenly gets super mad for no reason, covering up half the screen while you're in a 3x speed spider section. I found this pretty annoying, since it makes the level less sight readable, though to be fair, that could just be a skill issue on my part. The level is great overall, but if we were rating just the boss fight, I have to put it a bit lower on the list due to its simplicity compared to the others. C tier. Change of Scene, a more recent level created by Blee, earned a spot on the list due to its unique style and perfect execution. However, I'm not going to dive deeper into the level's design, as we're here to focus solely on ranking the boss fights. Change of Scene has two main paths, with the second one being triggered by clicking at the start of the level. This path is called the Imagination Path, where the beasts are real, and that's the one we're gonna be discussing here. The level features different boss fights for each stage, all of which are completely different from one another and match the aesthetic of their respective stages. Right at the start, the player is greeted by a green dragon with funny eyes, breathing flames and chasing them. Next, the player faces a pair of smaller red dragons that attempt to eat them by opening their massive mouths. After that, we take a trip into a stormy sea, where a gigantic octopus tries to smash the player with its tentacles. Then, out of nowhere, the player finds themselves in hell, being chased by an absolutely terrifying demon dragon creature shooting fireballs. For the next boss fight, the player has to face a slimy ghost that screams out some kind of sound waves. Now, I may not be describing every single detail perfectly, but you get the idea. After all these intense boss fights, there's a short part where all the previous bosses appear in order. This isn't a part of any boss fight, but I decided to mention it anyway, because it's pretty cool. Now, if this list was about the best overall level, Change of Scene would definitely be at the top, but since we're ranking the boss fights alone, I'm gonna place it in higher B tier. Next up is the Eschaton, or the Eschaton, however you pronounce it. This level is essentially a 5-minute boss fight with a few breaks in between, and it looks absolutely phenomenal. From the level design, sync, boss design, background, visual effects, everything. And let's just say, the actual boss fights are kinda crazy. I'll admit it, I'm kind of a Zender game simp, but I think it's all justified by just how freaking cool this level is. The attention to detail is insane, especially with all those boss visuals, which create such a dramatic atmosphere. Oh, and did I mention this guy made this level on mobile? If you've never seen this level, I strongly urge you to check it out, as I've provided links to all the boss fights in the description below. Now, to no one's surprise, I'm putting this in S tier. Funnily enough, the next level on the list was also made by Zender Game, but a bit earlier, as it was actually used in one of the parts of the Eschaton. Boss 3 Electro. I decided to put it on the list because it's one of the more famous ones from his boss series. So this one looks like a cat robot boss fight, judging by its ears and the paw visible on the side of its head. It's clear that this one is way simpler in terms of overall design and has a whole different style. A few things worth mentioning are: the boss has great sync with the music, and the shake effects are very well timed, making the gameplay a close 10 out of 10, at least in my experience. Another unique feature is the foreground movement during the boss fight. I feel like more bosses should utilize this idea, as it really adds depth by making the boss manipulate the whole screen instead of just the background. What I also really like is the intro the boss has. Just this face glitching and changing while the music builds up in the background is a great addition. Moreover, the song's a banger. Knowing the length of the level and how it's basically all boss fight, I feel like it should be placed in C tier above all the rest. Experiment 204, a level by the legend H-Hyper. Here, we jump straight into action as the boss fight literally starts at the 3rd second of the level. Apparently, the boss's name is the Wingless Dogragon. Yo, come on, who really cares? So in its first phase, the boss starts off on the right side facing the player with a very well shaded sprite. It begins attacking with, honestly, all sorts of different stuff, but it doesn't really get repetitive since every attack has a unique touch to it. The second phase, however, is when the boss actually appears fully facing the player, with his drone minions absolutely blasting the player with lasers. Oh, and also, the boss does a full 360 no scope while fighting the player. We saw this earlier in Boomslayer. I guess bro really likes his spins, and to be fair, I cannot really blame him. The idea is unique and very well executed on his part. And right when the player thinks it's all over, the dragon just falls from the sky and the fight continues basically until the end of the level, making the whole thing one big boss battle. Overall, it's perfectly done, and I'd be lying if I said it doesn't deserve a high spot on the list. A tier. The second to last level we're gonna be ranking is CastleMania, a mega collab by Serponge and many other well-known creators. A lot of people consider this level as one of the best in the game, thanks to its multiple paths, all of them completely unique and each featuring a different boss fight. First boss fight we're gonna be looking at is the Reaper, which the player encounters on the Reaper path. The boss looks quite intimidating and mainly attacks with its scythe, which apparently has elemental powers and can shoot projectiles at the player. I also really like the gimmick with the clock in the background. It actually flashes Roman numerals in red to show where the boss is gonna attack next. Very cool. After all that, we get a second phase, where the player leaves the castle and the Reaper now tries to kill him by destroying structures beneath the player to make them fall. The Deep Path has two bosses, with the first one being more of a mini-boss, a skeleton creature holding a mace with some fairly simple attacks. Later though, we get to the real deal, a huge eye monster that mainly attacks using lasers. There are also smaller minion copies of it that swarm the player. Overall, I really like this boss fight. Everything is synced well with the music, the screen shakes and flashes are timed perfectly, and the boss itself looks amazing. Only critique that I have is with the background. It's kind of plain compared to the rest of the level, not much going on back there. Some pillars or structures would have made it look way nicer in my opinion, but hey, who am I to judge? Lastly, we've got the library path, which is honestly my favorite. It just looks super cool. The boss here is a floating book, launching projectiles, spawning blocks the player has to dodge, and even turning into 3 bats at the end. While the design of the book is pretty simple, it just works. It really proves that creators don't need to be making all those super complex 100k object bosses for them to be enjoyable and visually appealing. However, after all of that glazing, I'd still place this one a bit lower on the list. In my very expert opinion, the bosses weren't the main highlight of the level. I'm gonna place it in C tier. For the last one, we've got the Mayhem War, a fan favorite much like the Eschaton. What this level does even better in my opinion is its insane background and boss art. The attention to detail here is actually nuts. What's also interesting about this level is that it tells a story about beasts fighting robots. Wow, what a way with words I have. Nah, but seriously, this level is a whole movie. However, with all of that said, it really comes down to personal preference. And for me, the final boss fight here feels a bit underwhelming. I feel like it's missing that energy and intensity that the Eschaton brings. The movements are more static, and there are fewer effects overall, which personally is something I value more than just polished art. Now, don't get me wrong, I could never in my life make a level this good. H-Hyper is an insane creator, and I mean zero disrespect. And honestly, you could argue that this level overall is better than the Eschaton. But we're here to rank the boss fights, and in my eyes, the Eschaton takes the win. All the links of levels and background audio are gonna be in the description below for all of you nerds out there. Leave a like if you stayed till the end, and if you're not content with the overall placements, then that's too bad. Thanks for watching, peace.